I'm Dr. Kori Propst, and I'm here today with Dr. Joe Klemczewski. Welcome to the Diet Doc Life Mastery podcast. Today we are in our macro mastery segment, and we're going to be discussing weight loss maintenance, but we're going to look at it from the perspective of we're transitioning from the diet now, right, Joe, into real life. And I say that and I'm thinking, well, while we were dieting, we should have been engaged in real life. So let's put this into some perspective and give our viewers and listeners, Joe, I think a really good kind of understanding of what's involved.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's very in vogue now. The industry has caught up to what we've been doing for 20 or more years in that we've always emphasized sustainability. And even in our YouTube channel, it's the Diet Doc Permanent Weight Loss. One of our books was the Permanent Weight Loss Secrets. And that's just always been the most important thing to us because we understand how difficult that is and how 95% or more of people regain all of their weight back and then some.
Right.
So I do hear a lot of chatter about this right now in the industry, and everybody's trying to find that niche and that's the new marketing ploy for promising results. It's now focusing more on that back end, and that is incredibly important. But it has to be looked at through the whole process. So let's start from day one of somebody engaging in a fat loss program. And of course, you want to keep your metabolism healthy. You want to avoid undue metabolic suppression. So if that was your goal, Kori, you're a pro at this. What are some of the top things that you would advise a client? Here we have to keep your metabolism, cranking along, healthy. So what are some of the things that you would say are non-negotiables?
Gosh, that's just such a broad question. I would want a much broader understanding of what they're doing currently and what they like to eat and what they don't. And then I would base my recommendations off of that to begin with, Joe. But I think I tend to look at things from the practical and the psychological side. And I would be concerned with what they are going to quote unquote give up or get super stringent around and maybe rigid about, because a lot of the people who come to us they've dieted repeatedly. They're chronic dieters. They are the person who has gained and lost a lot of weight and haven't been able to find that healthy kind of middle way or middle ground. But yeah, I think that's kind of where I would start. I don't know that I have any non-negotiables except to say that whatever we engage in right now, as you are losing body fat, I want you to ask yourself a question. Is this something you'd be willing to do for the rest of your life? And if it's not, then we need to change it. We need to shift it in some way so that it fits into your lifestyle instead of requires you to do a complete overhaul of your lifestyle.
So I think putting you on the spot there, you went a little bit beyond what my basic intention was, which is we're talking about keeping your metabolism high. How do you come out of a diet, or how do you create a diet so that your metabolism doesn't just plummet or become suppressed farther than it has to be? And the two greatest things that you can do to increase your metabolism is eat and move.
Yeah.
So the things we don't want to do is go on a starvation diet, something that's a very low calorie diet, which includes a lot of ketogenic plans. You also want to make sure that you're including even more training. So the first thing that I would look at is, okay, we're in this for the long haul. What is the safest, most effective way to lose body fat? I'm working with a client right now, and he wants to lose 80, 85 pounds. And historically, he's all or none. And so he's like, okay, let's just drop down to 50 grams of carbs or 100 and let's do 4 hours of cardio a day. So the first thing I have to do is say, no. We have these limits. We want to play in between. And because it's for your long-term stability, we've got to protect your metabolism. So number one, we have to have enough food Number two, we have to move. And I like the zeal of somebody who's willing to train harder and more often. And the interesting thing is you really, like I said, need to protect both sides of that equation, because you can overtrain. But as you get further into a diet and you're losing body fat and you've been in a calorie deficit for a few months, you just don't feel like it quite as often. You're not putting quite as much energy into your training. You might just sit on the couch a little bit more. So your non-exercise activity thermogenesis can start to go down. So I find it very helpful, especially for me, since my day isn't necessarily that active, to train twice a day. And they're brief. I have my weight training session, and then I also, there's some cardio involved in that. But then I also like, at the other end of the day, to throw in another 10 or 15 or 20 minutes of really aggressive cardio, because that just it makes the other half of my day better. I feel better, but it's also elevating my metabolism over the long term much greater than not doing that.
Yeah, I do. I have a lot of clients too, Joe, who they can't get in an hour to exercise during the day. It doesn't fit into their schedules very well, but it's much more doable and realistic for them to find 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or, when they're on their lunch break, to be taking a walk in order to increase that calorie burn, but to just for overall well-being too, and get some sun and vitamin D, and all of that plays a role. But I think most of us can agree that most of us have pretty sedentary jobs. So we're sitting most of the day. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep. And a couple of the things that I think we need to be reminded of are pretty benign. We know these things, but we don't always practice consistency. Like, just make sure you have enough protein, make sure you're drinking enough water. Some of those things really do have a metabolic effect over time. But one of the things that I would call more of a major issue is what Dr. Eric Helms has become very fond of looking at, which are diet breaks. And, for the reason we've always talked about having a higher calorie day once a week, or definitely include some social occasions and make sure that your calories come up to maintenance once in a while, it is being looked at now in terms of what happens if you take an entire 2 weeks off or a month off. Let's say you lose 25 pounds and then you just maintain that for a certain span of time. Again, this is being looked at in research. And, in a preliminary study, maybe a couple, they found that at least it doesn't cause harm. In other words, you can lose the same amount of weight in the same amount of time, even by taking those breaks. So there could be some metabolic enhancement to that. I certainly find that's true, especially for people who diet for more than about 6 to 9 months. As soon as you get into that 9 to 12 month phase, there is some real metabolic suppression that starts to occur. And you're just grinding your body so far against that metabolic spring that you're probably going to have a rebound, and you need to protect against that.
Well, okay, Joe. So whether it's a diet break, and I hesitate to say like take time off, because if we're doing, I am still working on trying to find appropriate language. And it's so complicated in terms of the emotion around it and the psychology around dieting. But say that we have, whether we are dieting to lose body fat and we have lost the amount that we feel is appropriate, or we've reached a weight that we'd like to maintain at, or we still are going to diet some more, but we're going to take a diet break. Let's talk about how to move into that maintenance area, because in both cases, we're moving into a maintenance area. So how do we do that? And then what are the strategies? Because we're talking about like short-term, first few weeks, maybe month or two, and then maybe we can talk about the strategies post month or two.
Absolutely. And that's what I wanted to end with, because that is the important part, is getting to that place where you're finally finished. But just kind of put these segments together. You've got the beginning phases of your diet, Then you've got that interim where you're just deep into that process and you got to know how to manage when you're at risk metabolically more than ever. And then how do you transition out when you've met your ultimate goal? Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, all the things that we've already discussed, make sure your calories are high enough, make sure you keep moving. You've got some very structured training, including some high intensity stuff. That's where you pay your dues when you don't necessarily feel like it, you're tired, and yet you want to progress your capacity. You want to increase your VO2 max, your strength. So those are areas when you're against the wall, so to speak, in your diet, where you just keep pushing, and that can keep your metabolism higher. Mm-hmm. The diet breaks are one factor, and I appreciate you bringing up language because I know how important that is. And it's not that you're just quitting, you're not giving up on your goals for a month or a week. Yeah. It's coming into that place with some clarity, because I don't know if you remember, one study that I focused on in my very first book was the fact that if you yo-yo diet, and by that I mean, you've been dieting for at least a few weeks, mm-hmm. then you kind of binge, you have to gain some weight, and then you start dieting again, and then you binge. Mm-hmm. Every time you do that, and I think they went out 3 cycles, your metabolism gets cut almost in half. So you would think having this massive influx of food is going to help, but when it's followed, when it's on the heels of a massive deficit, and then there's the binge, another
deficit,
your body starts adapting by protecting against
mm-hmm.
those dieting spans. And so you really want some consistency and, like you said, some strategy. Mm-hmm. So what I would do is make sure that when you're coming out of it, you already have a plan. I talked to one of my clients this morning who is the reigning WNBF Pro World Champion, because her contest is in a week and a half. So we're talking about that, but we're also talking about what to do after the contest. Right. And we even had a conversation about why she looks different this year. Mm-hmm. And that is because we had that contest, then we stayed in touch, and we had a more managed off season. Mm-hmm. So she's curious, Joe, like even my husband said, why am I so much bigger now? Why do I look like I have more muscle even though I'm just as lean? And it's because we managed coming out of the diet better. And even at the end of her diet last year to win the world championships, we had done this metabolic building phase where we had been increasing her calories, almost doubled them in the month before the show. So that's exactly what I think we need to talk about, Kori, when you use the word strategy. Mm-hmm. That's some pretty damn good strategy when you can, instead of being crippled by a diet, mm-hmm. you can actually win a world physique title, and then you can come out of it and end up looking even better the next year, feeling better the next year. So mm-hmm. that's what we'll spend our last few minutes talking about.
Okay.
So let's talk about another client and friend, Paul Ravella. He just placed second to the Yorton Cup, and he spent almost a full year dieting. Matter of fact, he said he started dieting January 1st, and that's a lie. Paul lied to you guys. He started about 2 or 3 months prior, and we were already cleaning up his diet moving into the year because he knew he was going to be having a baby, and it was going to get tough, and he wanted to compete kind of in the spring. And so he went more than a full year, but there mm-hmm. were diet breaks. There were times when he said, I'm traveling a lot this mm-hmm. month. I'm not going to focus on losing. He's still totally eating clean. Everything's great. But he didn't diet aggressively for that whole year. He was very patient. Mm-hmm. And even when he was on the road, eating in restaurants, he was tracking things, looking at his weight and all of that. So here's the bottom line. For you guys getting to the end of your fat loss process, you've met all your goals, your physique is right where you want it. If you haven't been building your food intake up gradually, this is the time to do it. Of course, you might want to have some kind of a celebration dinner event, have some food. Anybody after a diet, that's normal. But hopefully, you've been practicing moderation. Mm-hmm. The goal isn't to just make yourself sick and regain a bunch of fat back. It's a matter of saying, hey, I'm having the foods I like. This is fun. And you've got a plan. You've got a strategy. Don't be that person who goes to every single restaurant. You've been making a list, all the foods, going through the grocery store, just piling stuff in that you haven't been eating for months. You're giving me that quizzical look, Kori, but that happens.
I've never heard of it necessarily happening to anyone except bodybuilding competitors, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't have a single, I was going to say normal person client, general population person who comes to me and does that, because we are incorporating those sorts of foods into their nutritional strategy the entire time. So there is no sense of urgency to stuff what they haven't had for a year into their diets.
Okay. So point taken, that was extreme. Maybe in the general population, it happens more insidiously, where somebody just goes out and they overeat a little bit and then they get a little depressed and then they do it again. And pretty soon they're in the pantry just mowing down bags of Oreos. I mean, we know that can happen.
Totally. And there's binge eating and there's emotional eating. And even that can happen, and not even because they're in a caloric deficit and they're not eating enough. That happens a lot, but another topic.
and those are my last couple points in how to facilitate and manage your own best process back into maintenance. Is you really do need a strategy. You need to say, I'm doing okay. I'm enjoying the foods I like. So I'm still going to have enough structure in my day. These foods are fine and perfect for me. They're good. And I'll indulge this way. Maybe once a week I'll do this, or twice a week. You've got to have some strategy that involves structure that is part of your plan. And the second part of that is you've got to have some realistic expectations. So that's why one of the reasons why I tend to eat almost in a calorie deficit most of the time, most of the week, is because I know I am going to be traveling and having some burgers and fries or some steak or some dessert. I'm going to include that. So it's already factored into my day. I eat ice cream almost every night. It's kind of an addiction to me, where after dinner, I almost don't feel like, my night is complete if I don't go get a little half a cup or so of frozen yogurt out of the fridge. And I factor that in. That's part of my strategy, something that's thought out and well practiced. So I think that's very important. And lastly, what I said there was just having realistic expectations. Find a range that's comfortable for you and be okay with those fluctuations within that window. Don't feel like every time you eat something you didn't intend, or anytime you see the scale go up a pound or two, that it's a crisis and you got to slam back into dieting mode. Just chill out and make sure that you're looking at the long term, not just those acute markers. And guys, this whole topic is really in response to one of our listeners who requested this. And so we sent out through our own social media channels some requests, what other topics you guys want to hear about. And that was more internal with our client base and our Diet Doc program owners. So I want to offer that to you guys as well. If you have questions, other topics that you want us to hit with a lot of specificity, please suggest them, and we're going to make sure we keep doing that.
That would be great, Joe. All right. Well, thank you very much.